everyone. Welcome back to a brand new episode of Ball Talk with Chanel. If you're new here, hello. My name is Chanel, and every Monday we discuss the latest news and scores that has happened in sports. So, if you do not want to miss a single episode, new episodes come out every Monday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you do not want to miss a single episode, then please be sure to hit the subscribe button down below and also turn on notifications. And also, too, if you really enjoy this episode, then please be sure to give this video a thumbs up so I can continue to make videos just like this. Also, too, check out the description box down below. That'll give you my social media accounts. And also, too, if you want to listen to this episode on the go, then you can listen to this on Spotify, or you can even watch this on Patreon. So be sure to click on the link in my bio and be sure to sign up for my Patreon, or you can go to patreon.com/balltalk with Chanel. Now, this episode, we have a lot to discuss. We have some very shocking news that has happened in the NFL when it comes to different signings and different trades that has happened. We have some news that's happened in the NBA that's actually seen as very controversial. We are in the middle of March Madness. We got some big news coming from the WNBA. Now, I am not going to mention everything that has happened in sports in the last week in this episode because that would make this episode way too long. So that is why I have my own newsletter called Ball Talk Breakdown. Now, if you did not know, Ball Talk Breakdown has a new issue comes out every Monday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And what this does is this goes over some of the big news that's happened in sports that I do not mention in this podcast. So just to give you a little bit of an example, right? So for this issue that came out this morning, we talked about why Justin Fields going to the Kansas City Chiefs was actually a good move for the team. What is going to happen with the Sebastian Fundora and Keith Thurman fight this weekend? How exactly is Duke going to handle the rest of this tournament? And also, too, talking about how the Champions League is going as of right now. So, if you want to hear more news topics and everything else that I do not mention in this podcast, then please be sure to click on the link in my bio, or you can go to newsletter.balltalkchanel.com, which you will see right over here. And please be sure to subscribe to the newsletter because, like I said beforehand, new issues come out every Monday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, like I mentioned beforehand, there is a lot that has happened in the NFL, but I want to focus on what I think are some of the biggest news that has happened. So first one, let's start off with Miami quarterback Tua Tagavailoa. Now, it was announced that the Dolphins did cut Tua after drafting him 5th overall in the 2020 draft. Now, this should come as a shock to absolutely nobody. He did not have the greatest season in the world, right? Having a completion percentage of around 67%. He had a QBR of around 34. It was just not a good season for Tua at all. And ultimately, the Dolphins do need to make a decision in order to progress the team and just make it better for the future. Now, what's crazy about this is the fact that Tua is extremely costly for the team. Tua would actually cost the Dolphins around $99 million in dead money against the salary cap. So what the Dolphins decided to do was give Tua basically a post-June 1st designation, which basically means that around $67 million in dead money will be assigned for this upcoming season. And then the other $30 to $33 million in dead money will be assigned for next season. So for each season, it would be a little bit cheaper for the team. But ultimately, that is one of the largest dead monies against the salary cap in NFL history. It is insane. But ultimately, like I said beforehand, this should come as a shock to nobody because ultimately the Dolphins do need to make some sort of decision and they need to move on from Tua ultimately. Now, what did shock me though was that the Falcons decided that they wanted to sign Tua to a 1-year deal. Now, the Falcons are in a little bit of a pickle as of right now. They did officially waive Kirk Cousins, even though he had a 4-year, $100 million contract deal that they signed him. And Michael Penix Jr., who is supposed to be their young quarterback, basically their franchise quarterback, is currently out with a torn ACL injury. Now, this upcoming NFL draft is not very quarterback heavy. You don't have a lot of strong quarterbacks that are coming out this year. So it does ultimately make sense that the Falcons would want to sign or trade for a new quarterback rather than trying to get one for this upcoming draft, especially given that they do not have the number one overall pick and they're ultimately not getting Fernando Mendoza, right? Everyone knows Fernando is effectively going to go to the Raiders unless the Raiders make a very stupid decision. Now, why it shocked me that they decided to go and sign Tua is because obviously, we saw with the Dolphins that Tua did not have a great season, especially with someone like Devin Achane, which everyone knows is a very, very strong and very, very effective running back. So I don't know what the Falcons and Stefanski is kind of thinking as of right now. I don't know if they're thinking, you know what, we have Bijan Robinson over here, so we're going to focus a lot on the run game for this season and then hopefully get a better quarterback for next season. I don't know if they're thinking that Tua is good enough for especially the passing game with receivers such as Drake London. I don't know exactly what they are thinking, but it is interesting that they decided to go the Tua route rather than some of the other quarterbacks that were waived or that decided to be free agents for this upcoming season. So I do think that is a really interesting decision that they went the Tua route, and it will be interesting to see how Tua performs with the Falcons. Now, speaking of quarterback switching teams, let's actually talk about Geno Smith. Now, Geno did spend one season, of course, with the Raiders after spending majority of his season with the Seahawks. Now, this past season with the Raiders, as everyone knows, is not a great season for him. He definitely had one of the worst seasons of his career. He only threw for around 3,000 yards. He threw like 19 touchdowns with 17 interceptions. He had a QBR of 34. Like, it was just not a good season for Geno at all. Now, like I mentioned beforehand, the Raiders do have the number one overall pick, and everyone is expecting for the Raiders to pick up quarterback Fernando Mendoza. So, it comes as a shock to nobody that the Raiders decided to go and waive Geno. Now, of course, this makes sense, right? You need to move on with your quarterback. You already have young talent. You have Ashton Jeanty. You have Brock Bowers. You do need a quarterback that can put your offense together, right? You are basically a quarterback and a couple of receivers away from having a pretty solid offensive scheme. But if you have someone like Geno as your quarterback, ultimately that is what's going to hold the offense back. I hate to put it like that, but that's ultimately true. So, especially given that the Raiders are seemingly going to go the Fernando Mendoza route, they want Fernando to be that franchise quarterback, that superstar for the team. It does make sense that the Raiders want to go and move on from Geno, cut ties with him, and really put all of your resources and energy towards getting Mendoza and getting him ready for the next season. Now, what did shock me, though, was that the Jets decided that they wanted to pick up Geno and sign him to at least a one-year deal. Now, the Jets also have been a team that has not been doing well. Okay, now this past season, they have lost their star cornerback, Sauce Gardner, to the Indianapolis Colts, right? They still have their running back, Breece Hall, that they just put a franchise tag on. Their quarterback room last season was just not that good either. I mean, your options are Tyrod Taylor or Justin Fields, right? Justin, who I just mentioned, just got traded to the Kansas City Chiefs, which, like I said before, and if you want to read more about what I think about that trade, then please be sure to go and subscribe to my newsletter. But it does not make sense, though, as to why the Jets want to go and sign Geno at this moment. Maybe it's because they felt that Justin was not the answer for the team, and they just need somebody, and they want to go and pick up a quarterback, and they figure Geno will be good for right now. I don't know exactly what they're expecting from Geno, but if they are expecting a better record than they had this past season, then I'm sorry, I do think they are a little delusional. Because you have players such as Breece Hall, which everyone knows is such a star running back, but is your plan right now to focus heavily on the run game, just like the Falcons with Tua, allegedly, supposedly? Is the goal here, okay, well, we know that Geno can throw, so, maybe we can rely a little bit more on the passing game? I'm not quite sure what the thinking is here as to why the Jets decided that they want to go and sign Geno. Maybe their plan is just to tank this upcoming season so that way they can get the number one overall pick in the 2027 draft and ultimately get a player like Arch Manning. Maybe that is their plan. But ultimately, like I said beforehand, if their plan is to basically do better than they did last season and they thought Geno was the answer, I hate to break it to them, that is not the answer. So it will be interesting to see exactly how the Jets do for this upcoming season, but that signing of them wanting to go and get Geno truly did not make any sense, because at that point they should have just kept Justin Fields if that was the route they were going to go. Now, the next news that I want to talk about is this whole Ravens, Max Crosby, Trey Hendrickson. Let's start from the beginning of what exactly happened. So Max Crosby, as everyone knows, was drafted by the Raiders back in 2019. He has been with the team his entire career. Now, this past season, just like the last few seasons, the Raiders have been struggling, like what I just mentioned beforehand. It even got to the point where for the last 2 games of this past season, the Raiders actually benched Crosby, which, according to reports, that really frustrated Crosby, and Crosby really wanted a trade. So, it was reported that Crosby was traded to the Ravens for a 2026 first-round pick and a 2027 first-round pick. Now, when this news came out, I immediately thought about it, right? And thought, you know what? Why exactly would the Raiders want to go and trade their best defensive player? Why would they want to go do that? But ultimately, it did make sense. First of all, you are getting rid of a player who ultimately does not want to be there, right? So that creates a better environment for the team to basically have a better chance of success. And on top of that too, you get a first round pick for 2026 and also for 2027. Remember, like I mentioned beforehand, the Raiders have the number 1 overall pick. And for this upcoming draft, the Ravens have the 14th overall pick. So this means that for this draft, the Raiders would have the number 1 overall pick and the 14th overall pick, which they could use that 14th overall pick to then go and pick up a really solid defensive player, right? So I actually thought, okay, from the Raiders' perspective, I understand why they did that. And then with the Ravens, they want to tighten their defense. They want to tighten that pass rushing game. So it made sense as to why they would want a player like Max Crosby. Okay, that makes sense. Then, until it was reported that Crosby actually failed his physical, and the Ravens ultimately backed out of the deal. Now, whether he actually failed his physical or he truly did is ultimately up in the air. Some people don't believe that he actually failed his physical. Some people feel that it was just that the Raiders just did not want him for whatever reason it may be. But apparently, Crosby was actually injured too, so it does make sense that he would not fully pass the physical as of right now because he is currently injured. Whatever the case may be, the Ravens are not getting Max Crosby. Max Crosby is not joining the AFC North. But what it was reported, though, was that the Ravens actually signed Trey Hendrickson from Cincinnati. They signed him to a 4-year deal that is worth up to $120 million. Now, Trey is someone that I did not expect to leave Cincinnati, but maybe it was because of a contract dispute. Maybe it was because of the fact that the Ravens were offering him a lot of money. Maybe he is just frustrated with the fact that the Bengals just keep losing for the past few seasons ever since they had that Super Bowl run. Whatever the case may be, it does seem like Hendrickson was just not happy at all. And that is ultimately why he decided to go and join the Ravens. Now, what is really interesting, though, because I want to focus on the Ravens right now, is that the Ravens really looking at defensive players with these 2 moves is actually really interesting. Because I personally think that the Ravens defense is fine. Now, can they go and focus a lot on their pass rushing? Yes, they could. But I think that the Ravens need to really focus on their offensive weapons. You have Lamar Jackson, of course, you have Derrick Henry. Them giving up Isaiah Likely does not make any sense at all. You gave up Isaiah Likely for Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews, I'm sorry, is the most inconsistent player in the NFL. He will either give you 200 yards and 3 touchdowns, or he will give you 6 yards with 1 reception. There is no in between with Andrews. So the Ravens decided to give Mark the bigger contract and just let Isaiah go for him to go and sign with the Giants. That in and of itself just did not make any sense. But then outside of that, I mean, yeah, you have Zay Flowers, right, who is a solid receiver, right? But right now he is the 3rd option. But then outside of that, Rashad Bateman, I guess, but I just think they need to focus on getting really solid receivers. Someone that Lamar Jackson can go and reliably throw the ball to. Because I think if they focus a lot on that, the Ravens could actually progress forward and be in the playoffs not only a lot more often, but they could actually progress forward even to the AFC Championship game. I really do believe that the Ravens are a couple of receivers away from having a really, really good team. Because, like I said, you already have the running back game down, right? You already got the quarterback in Lamar Jackson. I guess you got a tight end. I still don't understand why they went and got rid of Isaiah Likely, but you don't have the receivers around Lamar. And I truly think that's the biggest issue. Now, whether they want to use the draft to pick up a couple of receivers, that could be a possibility. But I would think that with the NFL free agency and with the signings and the tradings and everything else, they would also focus a lot on these receivers. So it will be interesting to see what the Ravens decide to do when it comes to the draft, because if they do focus on the receivers in the draft, then this signing in it of itself does make sense. But if they focus more on defensive players in the draft, then nothing here makes sense, because I do think that they actually need better receivers. Now, the last news that I want to talk about before I move on is that Michael Pittman was traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers for a draft pick. Now, let's look at it from the Steelers' perspective, okay? The Steelers right now, with the signing of Michael Pittman Jr., I think that is a great signing, okay? You already have DK Metcalf. Now you have Michael Pittman Jr., and then you could put in Roman Wilson, who I personally think the Steelers need to give more of a chance. I have not seen Roman Wilson really this past season, and I fear that we have a talented player that is just wasting away on the bench. But ultimately, we have those 3 receivers. That is solid, okay? But my question is, when are the Steelers going to get a quarterback? When exactly are the Steelers going to get a young quarterback that they can turn into a franchise quarterback? That someone that they can develop and make better and make it so that way it's like Patrick Mahomes with the Chiefs, or Jalen Hurts with the Eagles, right? Or Lamar Jackson with the Ravens. When are the Steelers going to have a quarterback like that? Because the last time the Steelers had someone like that was literally Ben Roethlisberger. So when exactly are the Steelers going to have that? Because let's actually look at the quarterback room as of right now. You have Aaron Rodgers, who, I'm sorry, he is old. He needs to retire, okay? He has already cemented his legacy in the NFL. He is more than likely going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, okay? We all know that. He just needs to retire. He is way too old as of right now, okay? So you have Aaron Rodgers. Mason Rudolph is Mason Rudolph. I just don't think there is much that needs to be said about him. Skylar Thompson is Skylar Thompson. Same thing like Mason Rudolph. I don't think there is much that needs to be said. And I can't really say much about Will Howard because the Steelers never gave him a fair chance this past season. So my ultimate question is, when are the Steelers going to have that young franchise quarterback? I thought personally with this past draft that it was going to be Shedeur Sanders. I thought the Steelers were going to go and sign Shedeur. And ultimately, as you can see, they decided not to, and they decided to go the Will Howard route. Okay, which I'm not the biggest fan of him. I wasn't the biggest fan of him at Ohio State, but ultimately, like I said, I'm reserving judgment on Will Howard because the Steelers never fairly gave him a chance. But the question is the idea that Will Howard is supposed to be that young franchise quarterback. And just let Aaron play out for now until he retires, and then you give the reins to Will Howard? Is that the determination? Is that the plan? Or is the plan right now to let Aaron play until he retires and then you give it to Mason Rudolph? Because it's not like this is the first time that Mason Rudolph has been on the Steelers. He has been on the Steelers 2 other times. And each time it has not been a good scenario. So again, I ask, is Will Howard supposed to be that young franchise quarterback? Or are the Steelers going to eventually trade a couple of the quarterbacks, whoever it may be, and actually get another quarterback that they are going to give a chance? Because ultimately, you can sign Michael Pittman. You can get all these great receivers. But if you don't have a solid quarterback to complement these receivers, then signing these receivers ultimately mean nothing. So it will be interesting to see exactly what the Steelers decide to do. Are you going to go and give up some of the quarterbacks and get a young quarterback, right? Are you going to give Will Howard a chance, right? And see if he can be the franchise quarterback, right? What exactly are the Steelers going to do when it comes to this quarterback situation? It's something that we are going to have to wait and see. But ultimately, I want to move on to the next section and actually talk about the NBA. Now, with the NBA, there are 2 main news that I want to talk about. The first one being about this whole controversy that happened in the last week or 2 regarding Magic City. So if you do not know what I'm talking about, let me catch you up to speed. Let me explain to you everything that's going on. So it was reported that the Atlanta Hawks want to have what's called a Magic City night. Now, Magic City is a prominent strip club that is located in Atlanta, and it is supposed to be a night of honoring this iconic institution that has been around since the 1980s. Now, the Hawks' idea were they were going to put out some live performers, not performers as in strippers, but performers as in rappers. So T.I. was supposed to perform. They're supposed to be selling some lemon pepper wings. And they were also going to be selling some merchandise. Again, no strippers involved. It just says Magic City, right? That's all it says. Now, when that news came out, there was a lot of frustration that came out from the NBA community. And one of the players that actually spoke out against Magic City was San Antonio Spurs player Luke Cornett. And I actually want to read you his statement of what he has posted in regards to Magic City. So this is what he said. Concerning the Atlanta Hawks, this week, the Atlanta Hawks announced a special one-night collaboration to celebrate the city's iconic cultural institution, Magic City, during the team's home game against Orlando on Monday, March 16th. In its press conference, the Hawks failed to acknowledge that this place is, as the business itself boasts, Atlanta's premier strip club. Given this fact, I would like to respectfully ask that the Atlanta Hawks cancel this promotional night with Magic City. The NBA should desire to protect and esteem women, many of whom work diligently every day to make this the best basketball league in the world. We should promote an atmosphere that is protective and respectful of the daughters, wives, sisters, mothers, and partners that we know and love. Allowing this night to go forward without protest would reflect poorly on us as an NBA community, specifically in being complicit in the potential objectification and mistreatment of women in our society. Regardless of how a woman finds her way into the adult entertainment industry, many in this space experience abuse, harassment, and violence in which they should never be subjected. I'd like to encourage the league, its owners, employees, and fans to hold the Atlanta Hawks to a higher standard of what they find worthy of promoting. I and others throughout the league were surprised and object to the Hawks' decision. We desire to provide an environment where fans of all ages can safely come and enjoy the game of basketball, and where we can celebrate the history and culture of communities in good conscience. The celebration of a strip club is not conduct aligned with that vision. Please join me in petitioning the Atlanta Hawks to cancel this promotion so as to ensure that the NBA remains a safe, respectful, and welcoming environment for everyone involved. Luke Cornett. So after this statement came out, it was reported that the NBA actually went and canceled Magic City. The Atlanta Hawks went and put out a statement, said that they were disappointed in this decision, but they respect the NBA's decision and would ultimately comply with it. So ultimately, last Monday, Magic City was officially canceled. Now, here's the thing. It seems like everybody that objects to the whole Magic City Night celebration is on the same wavelength as Luke Cornett. So I will use his statements to base off my opinion. Okay. Now, listening to Luke's statements, okay, regarding Magic City Night and why he objects. In the general scheme of things, is he wrong? No. Women are often objectified. Women are mistreated, right? The NBA should have a high standard, right? I get that, okay? He is not wrong in the general sense. But here is what I am going to say, and that is just two things. For one, I honestly don't see the issue of why this was canceled. Okay, yes, you are celebrating the iconic cultural institution that is of a strip club. But when you actually look and listen to what the Hawks decide to do, it's not as if they went and they brought out strippers. It's not as if they were going to do something inappropriate. It was literal merchandise, selling lemon pepper wings, and having T.I. perform. Okay? So there's nothing inherently wrong with how the Hawks were trying to go and celebrate this. Okay? So ultimately, I don't know why people were so against this whole idea. Now, if the whole plan was to bring out strippers and bring out a stripping pole and, women come out naked and twerk and everything else, I completely understand why people would be so against that. But the fact that it is not any of that, it still baffles me as to why this had to be canceled. And for number two, I think it is a little hypocritical that people want to talk about respecting and esteeming women and the mistreatment and everything else when you have a lot of women that speak out against domestic violence, right? They speak out against mistreatment against them in general, and those NBA personnel don't even get the harsh treatment for how they treat women. So how can you possibly sit here and say that you are all about respecting and esteeming women when there are NBA players that have literally went and put their hands on women? They have committed violence against women, and they did not receive that harsh of a treatment. It was maybe a 1-game suspension, maybe, and then they went back onto the court getting paid millions of dollars as per usual. So I think it is that makes me look at it and say, why exactly did you want to cancel Magic City Night? Because if it truly was about respecting women, then you would have that same energy when women come out against different NBA players and NBA personnel, when they're speaking out against them, talking about the domestic violence, the stalking, the abuse, the everything that they experience. You would have harsher treatments against those players if you truly were about respecting women. So that's where I am, where it comes to this whole, this is really hypocritical, because there's no way that you can sit here and say that you are all about respecting women when this is how you treat the players that are accused and alleged of mistreating women. So that's all I have to say. I think that the NBA made a very silly decision in canceling Magic City Night, but ultimately it is what it is, right? Now, the second thing that I want to talk about is Bam's 83-point game. So, if you missed the news, the Heat last week played the Washington Wizards, and Bam went off, scored 83 points. Now, we all remember back in 2006 when Kobe scored 81 points against the Toronto Raptors, and that was the second most points scored in a game in NBA history, behind Wilt Chamberlain in his 100-point game. With Bam's 83-point game, now he has passed Kobe, and now he has the second most points scored in an NBA game in history, of course trailing behind Wilt Chamberlain with that 100-point game. And ever since that has happened, I have seen so much hatred being put out towards Bam. Now, a lot of people want to say that it's not hatred, that it's just their opinion, and that there's no hate. No, there truly is hate. Because people want to downplay it by saying, oh, well, Kobe's is more impressive because look at the shooting split. Or, oh, it's the Washington Wizards. They're basically playing against a bunch of G League players. This doesn't count. Or, oh, well, I don't understand because Bam Adebayo shot 43 free throws and this is just unfair, blah, 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 blah. Okay, let's actually get down to the core issue that I think people have when it comes to Bam's 83-point game. And that is, it's not the fact that it's the Washington Wizards. It's not the fact that it is 83 points. It has everything to do with the fact that it is Bam Adebayo. That is what I think the biggest issue is with people, okay? So when you think about it, right? The original list of the most points scored in an NBA game in history, Will Chamberlain, right, which everyone knows is an iconic player, and then Kobe, and then Will Chamberlain for the next couple of times, to then Dame, and then to Luka. Okay, you're talking about very iconic players. You're talking about players that some people would argue, okay, this player is such a great player. This player is my favorite, okay? When you put Bam Adebayo up there, and I say this with no disrespect, when you put Bam up there, I think it definitely messes with people's minds because Bam is not your typical favorite NBA player. I'm sorry. Again, I say this with no types of disrespect, okay? I love Bam. I say this with no disrespect, okay? No one is really going to a Heat game to really watch Bam Adebayo, okay? Let's think about it for the last, for example, couple of years, right? When Jimmy Butler was there, more people were there to see Jimmy Butler, okay, than they were to really see Bam. And this is, again, not to say that Bam's a bad player. It's just he is not your typical NBA favorite player. He is not your LeBron James, your Steph Curry, your Kevin Durant, your Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, your Jalen Brunson, your Luka Doncic, your Nikola Jokic. He is not one of those players where if you were to ask an NBA fan who is their favorite player, they will list one of the players that I just named. Okay? So I think the problem with people is the fact that it is Bam that holds that record, right? For the second most points scored in an NBA game in history. Because let's be honest, if this was LeBron, if this was Steph, if this was KD, if this was Luka, if this was Shai, if this was Jalen, if this was Anthony Edwards, if this was any of the typical favorite NBA players that scored 83 points, no one else would have the same issue. No one else would be complaining about shooting splits or the fact that it's the Washington Wizards or anything else. Everybody would just be in amazement about how it was 83 points, okay? So if it was LeBron James that scored 83 points, oh, the king is here. If it was Steph Curry, oh, Chef Curry is cooking, right? If it was Kevin Durant, right? The Grim Reaper strikes again, right? If it was Luka magic, right? If it was Shai, Shai does it again, right? If it was Nikola Jokic, the Joker strikes, right? If it was one of the favorite NBA players, no one would have an issue. The problem is that it is Bam Adebayo, and no one really knows what to do with it. Because let's also be honest, okay? For those people that want to say, oh, well, it's the Washington Wizards and you're basically playing a bunch of G League players. Okay, for one, the Washington Wizards, as bad as they are, right? Everyone knows that they're not a good team, right? They are still an NBA team. They are still part of the NBA organization. They are as much of an NBA team as the LA Lakers, as the Golden State Warriors, as the Oklahoma City Thunder, as the Detroit Pistons, as the New York Knicks, etc., etc., etc. So no matter how badly that they are performing, they are still nevertheless an NBA team. So let's cut that crap right there, because I don't want to hear anybody talking about how, oh, it's just the Washington Wizards. If it was that simple, why don't other players go and do it? If it was that simple to score 83 points or more against the Washington Wizards, why don't you see other players do it? If it was that simple, why can't Luka do it? Why didn't Wemby do it? Why didn't Shai do it? Why didn't Steph do it? Why didn't LeBron do it? Why didn't Joker do it? Why didn't Jalen Brunson do it? Right? If it was that simple, and you want to know why they didn't do that this season, because scoring 83 points in an NBA game is not that simple. Period. It is not that simple. I don't care how bad of a team you are. They are still a professional organization. Scoring anything above like 40 points, and even then 40 is really high. Scoring above 40 is extremely, extremely difficult. Okay? So when you look at how someone goes and scores 83 points, I don't care what team it is. That is still extremely, extremely impressive. And then for those that want to say, oh, well, he shot 43 free throws. Okay, of the 43, he made 36 of them, which means that the other 47 points he scored on the floor. The other 47 points was scored on the floor. Whether it was a three, whether it was a layup, whether it was a jump shot, whatever it may be, he still scored 47 points on the floor. It's not even like the free throws made up majority of his points. I would understand a little bit more if the free throws made up the majority of the points, where it's like, okay, I understand where there could be an argument. All right? But for those that want to talk about how, oh, he shot 43 points, so therefore this doesn't count, I'm sorry. When does free throws not count? Free throws are still points. And you're mad at him because he made 36 free throws? Like, that in and of itself does not make any sense. And that's why I say that the reason why, the core reason I believe why people don't want to give Bam Adebayo his flowers is because of the fact that it is Bam Adebayo. If it was anybody else's favorite NBA players, there would not be the same complaints, arguments, and signs and groans, and let me put an asterisk next to it, whatever. And also, too, what I also think as well, and, you know, this is just something that I think, too, I think people are trying to equate the fact that because Bam passed Kobe in this sort of achievement, then people think that, oh, it means that people want to make the argument that Bam is better than Kobe, right? Because, oh, he passed him in this achievement, and that's why people need to constantly bring up the difference between Bam and Kobe. No one is saying that Bam Adebayo is a better player than Kobe. Nobody is putting Bam Adebayo as a top 5 player of all time over Kobe. So that's also where I think that's why a lot of people are upset. One, because of the fact that Bam is not a typical NBA favorite player. And two, because people are trying to equate this achievement to then saying, oh, you know, Bam Adebayo is one of the greatest of all time. No, nobody's actually saying that. So I want to say a big congratulations to Bam Adebayo for scoring 83 points. That is extremely impressive. And please do not listen to the hate. But I want to now cut that short because I can go on forever. And I want to move on and actually talk about the WNBA. Now, the WNBA and the WNBPA have finally come to an agreement for this new CBA. It is about time. Now, if you did not know, the WNBA originally set a deadline for March 10th. They set that deadline so that way it does not affect this upcoming season. Now, opening tip-off is supposed to be on May 8th. So, as they're in the middle of negotiations, the WNBA said, you know what? We need to set a deadline for March 10th so that way it does not affect this upcoming season. March 10th comes and goes. March 11th comes and goes. March 12th comes and goes, okay? No CBA has been agreed upon, okay? Now, March 10th, apparently the WNBA and the WNBPA were in negotiations for 12 hours. 12 hours. And then, fast forward to just a couple of days ago, it was reported that the WNBA and the WNBPA have now come to an agreement for a new CBA. So, the big thing that was in contention between the WNBA and the WNBPA had to do with revenue share. Now, a lot of people get this a little bit confused and, well, you know, why exactly do they want the higher revenue share percentage and everything else? I've talked about this in several TikToks and also in previous podcast episodes. So if you want to understand more of that, then you can go and check that out. But they have finally come to an agreement when it comes to this whole revenue share and everything else. So let's actually discuss. So what the team has actually effectively agreed to is that, for one, the salary cap will be increased to $7 million for this upcoming season. So if you did not know, for last season, the salary cap was at $1.5 million. And now for this upcoming season, it's at $7 million. So you're talking about a major increase in the salary cap. Minimum salaries have been increased to $300,000. Average salaries have been increased to $600,000. So you're talking about over $500,000. And Supermax contracts have been increased to $1.5 $1.4 million. So what does this mean? This means that when it comes to these Supermax contracts, you're going to see players such as Asia Wilson, Brianna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu, and Kelsey Plum have 7-figure contracts, which is so historic for the WNBA. Because if you did not know, max contracts were at a little over $200,000 for so long. And now you're increasing it from $200K to over $1 million. Like, thank you. Thank God. Average salaries will be at over $500,000, right? So that is also great because that is reflective of how much the WNBA has grown. And minimum salaries are even in the 6 figures, which is also excellent. So this increase in the salaries is also good because what this means too is that players do not have to go overseas. So if you did not know, a lot of players during the offseason have to go overseas in order to make more money for, of course, their families and everything else, just so that way they can live in the economy that we are in as of right now. So with minimum salaries increasing to 6 figures, average salaries being at 6 figures, this means that the WNBA players do not have to go overseas. They can just chill out. They can participate in Unrivaled if they want to, right? Which I highly recommend that they do. But they can participate in Unrivaled if they have to. But they don't have to continue to play basketball overseas or whatnot in order to continue to make money for them to live, which is so great. What is also great too about this is that this means that the revenue share is at 20%, which, if you did not know, the revenue share beforehand in the last CBA was at 9%. Okay? The revenue share percentage was at 9% for player salaries. It has increased now to 20%. Now, is it as high as the players wanted it? No. They originally came in wanting it at 30%, but still, the fact that it was basically doubled, right? More than doubled, is so great, right? That means that this is going to continue to grow with each new CBA. And also too, this has also kicked in a revenue sharing model that the NBA has. Basically saying that as long as the WNBA continues to increase in revenue, the players' salaries gets to increase in revenue, which is so excellent because the last one that they had in their last CBA was that it needed to reach a certain number in order for that revenue sharing model to kick in, which it did kick in last season for the very first time. But with this new CBA, there is none of that, oh, you got to reach a certain number for the revenue sharing model to kick in. This is effectively like bottom line revenue sharing model automatically kicks in, which is so excellent. Now, another thing that I want to talk about that is really big for the WNBA is that teams now need to get consent to trade players if those players are pregnant. So this comes after the team went and traded De'Erica Hamby while she was pregnant. And I think this is a really important clause, and a lot of people seem to be really confused about this. So let me explain why this is really important. Pregnant women cannot go and travel as much because their immune systems are actually decreased, right? Everyone kind of knows that, right? You have a lower immune system when you are pregnant, which means you are highly susceptible to like illnesses and things like that, right? And on top of that, just imagine practically if a player is 8 months pregnant and the team is like, hey, you are getting traded to another team. You got to report there in a week while you are 8 months pregnant. Like, that in and of itself is a little insane. So I am glad that with this CBA that they are getting the consent from the players, making sure that the players are ready to be able to move, right, if they are pregnant. Whether the players are able to, right, physically and mentally be able to handle trying to get everything together so that way they can relocate while they are pregnant. I am so glad that they included this clause because this really does put the players' health and they put the players' benefits at the forefront, right? Putting their lives at the forefront. And I'm also happy because there is no lockout, there's no strike, and opening tip-off is still set for May 8th. So the league has not been impacted when it comes to this upcoming season. by the CBA agreement. So this is just great news all around for everybody. So that is truly, truly excellent. So now with all of that, now let's actually move on to college basketball. So if you did not know, we are actually in the middle of March Madness. So let's actually start with the men's, right? So I want to talk about a few games that has happened in both rounds 1 and then in rounds 2, and then just kind of discuss that, and then obviously move on to the women. So let's start first with round 1. Let's talk about Duke versus Siena, because when I tell you that that was a game that I was not expecting for it to be as close as it was, Duke was up by 4 with like 5 minutes left of regulation. Like, it was insane that Duke was not blowing that team out. That should have been a game where Duke should have won by like 30 points. I'm sorry. That should have been the game that Duke should have won by like 30 points, okay? Now, Duke did really struggle on the defensive end. No shots were really landing for them. Like, nothing was really going their way, and especially in the beginning of that game, like, Siena was really on a hot streak. Like, I mean, there was to the point where I was thinking, like, wow, is Siena going to pull off this ultimate upset against Duke, the number 1 team in the country? Now, ultimately, Duke did go and squeeze out a win, but that does raise question as to whether Duke has what it takes to move on and actually advance all the way to the national championship. Now, this is something that I described in my newsletter for the issue that came out this morning, so I am not going to go and repeat myself again, because those that have subscribed to the newsletter and they have read it, they know exactly how I feel about Duke. So now let's move on to the next game, and let's talk about VCU, because VCU pulled off the ultimate upset against UNC. They ended up winning and eliminated UNC out in the first round. Now, UNC is without their star player, Caleb Wilson, who was out because he broke his thumb during practice. So I think you did see a lot of that, a lot of confusion about what exactly they were going to do. UNC just seemed like they were just basically in shambles. Like, they did not know exactly what to do, right? They just could not have shots landed to them. They were very sloppy on defense. So ultimately, it was a good win for Virginia Commonwealth, but this was a win by Virginia Commonwealth that I personally was not expecting. I thought UNC would be good enough where they would move on to the second round, but it turned out I was completely wrong. Now, the next game that I want to talk about is Texas and BYU. Now, AJ DeBansa put up 35 points, 10 rebounds, and BYU still had the upset loss against Texas. The same Texas team that had to play in the first 4 in order to get into the tournament. Okay, this is the same team, mind you. And Texas ended up squeezing out the win against BYU. Now, I'm not going to lie, BYU is definitely a team that I thought was going to go to the Final Four. And not necessarily because of the fact that they are way better than the other teams in the region, but more or less because I thought that there were going to be teams that would fold. And turns out that it was actually BYU that folded. Now, a lot of people want to place blame on AJ DeBansa. They want to say, oh, well, was the NIL money for him really worth it? Stuff like that. And I just want to say, yes, it was, because that man put up 35 points and 10 rebounds. I don't care that that man took majority of BYU's shot attempts, because that is effectively what he's there to do. That is what BYU has done for the entirety of the regular season. So ultimately, AJ did exactly what he needed to do. AJ did his part. It was just that BYU, the team around him, just could not basically step up. They just could not do what they needed to do. It seemed like everybody was just focused on AJ, thought AJ was just going to carry the team all the way to the national championship, and ultimately Texas showed them that that was not going to work. And then the last game that I want to talk about is High Point versus Wisconsin. Now, this was a very, very close game, very back and forth, and ultimately High Point pulled off the upset. Now, it's really interesting because Wisconsin really did have like an up and down season. They were really not consistent, and this was a upset that I did not expect at all. It's actually really interesting. And let me tell you something. High Point was balling out in this game. Okay, they absolutely deserved that win. So now let's move on to round 2. Let's actually talk about Vanderbilt and Nebraska. Now, Vanderbilt and Nebraska was actually a really, really close game. Okay, this was a very back and forth game, right? And let me tell you something. there was a shot attempt, okay, made by Tyler Tanner of Vanderbilt that would have allowed Vanderbilt to win the game. That ball went in and out. So let me paint the scene, okay? Nebraska is up 74-72. It's 2.2 seconds left in regulation. Vanderbilt is over here inbounding the ball on the other side of the court, okay? They have 2.2 seconds to quickly dribble the ball and heave up a three to win the game, or pass it down the court, maybe shoot a jump shot or maybe go in for a layup in order to go and take this game into overtime, okay? Inbounded the ball to Tanner, right? And he throws up a shot from beyond half court, okay? So this is a three to win the game. That ball circles around the rim and bounces out. I actually posted about this on my TikTok, so you can go and check it out. But let me tell you something. That was a moment in which I nearly screamed off of my couch, because if that shot went in, that would have been the craziest shot in NCAA tournament history, no questions asked. That was an insane shot. It did what it needed to do. It bounced off the backboard. It went, to the rim. It circled around. The only thing was that it was just not enough in order for it to go fully in. It just jumped out. So that right there was a very devastating loss by Vanderbilt. Now, could Vanderbilt have played better defense in the first half and everything else? Yes, of course, right? But ultimately, this was a great back and forth game, and Nebraska is officially moving on to the Sweet 16. Now, the next game that I want to talk about is I want to talk about Texas and Gonzaga, okay? Now, for me, Gonzaga was a little overrated this season. I didn't find them to be that impressive. I didn't think they really had that solid of a team. I didn't think that they really had enough to make that push to the Sweet 16. But when I say that Texas really gave them a fight, again, same Texas team that had to play in the first four and then had to go and beat BYU, then turned around and beat Gonzaga. They are going to the Sweet 16. And let me tell you something, Texas is looking like they are on a hot streak. They are looking like a team that really could make it, apparently, to the Sweet 16, to the Elite Eight, even to the Final Four, right? They are on a hot streak right now that ultimately it's a major congratulations to them. Now, ultimately, those are all of the games that I am going to go over, because right now, as I'm recording, the other games are going on right now. But I want to move on and talk about the women's, because today would actually mark for them to be in the middle of round 2 of the March Madness tournament. So let's only just go over what's happened in round 1 and then a few games that's happened in round 2. So let's start off with the fact that NC State squeezed out the win against Tennessee. Now, Tennessee has been a really interesting team because NC State, as we know, they're a really good team. I can see NC State moving on probably to the Sweet 16, okay? But Tennessee's really interesting because they have the talent on the team, okay? There's no issue there when it comes to Tennessee and their talent. I think all the issues has to do with the coach. Because I have no idea what the coach is thinking, what she is doing, what type of play she's running. I have no idea what she's actually thinking. Because why exactly she's making certain switches, why she's not using a lot of pick and rolls, why she is not utilizing the jump shot, is really just beyond me. I would actually be shocked if Tennessee keeps her for another season. I'm not going to lie here. That sounds a little harsh. But I just don't think she is doing what Tennessee needs to do. Because this is Tennessee. This is supposed to be an iconic women's basketball program ran by Pat Summitt, okay, that she needs to keep up. And right now, she is not doing that good of a job. So I would be shocked if Tennessee keeps her for another season. But right now, it is looking like she is not doing what it takes for Tennessee to advance to the Sweet 16. Because like I said, they have the talent on the team, okay? They have the talent. The problem is purely the coaching, okay? And so when I say that I would be shocked if she is there next season, I mean that when I say I will be shocked if she is there next season. Because ultimately, I just don't think that she is doing the team justice, honestly. Okay, and that's just my personal opinion. But now let's move on to the next one, and let's talk about South Carolina. Because South Carolina beat Southern by 69 points. 69 points, I want you to keep in mind. 69 points. It is the largest margin in NCAA history. Now, I'm not shocked by this, okay? Now, South Carolina does have a really good team, right? Led by Tessa Johnson, with Raven Johnson and all the other players, okay? And Southern obviously does not have that strong of a team. I figured South Carolina was going to beat them, okay? But 69 points? Like, that is insane. 69 points is insane. That's a major congrats to South Carolina. I do think they are going to make it relatively far in the tournament, but just to give a little bit of a preview, I do think that UConn and UCLA are going to be playing in the national championship game. I don't think South Carolina has enough to really go to the championship game, but either way, they have a really good team where they could make that region super, super competitive. Now, the next game that I want to talk about is Virginia versus Georgia, because let me tell you something. That was a closer game than what I had expected. That game actually went into overtime, and Virginia barely squeezed out an overtime win against Georgia. Okay, very, very good game. Very good back and forth game. That was a very good defensive game. And let me tell you something. That is a team, I think Virginia is a team that I think more people need to pay attention to, because they are actually a lot better than what people think that they are. Now, do I think that they're going to go to the national championship game? No. Okay, I don't. But do I think they are going to go a lot further than what people expect? Yes, absolutely. Right? So that's a major congratulations to them. And then now let's talk about Southern Cal, okay? Southern Cal squeezed out a win against Clemson in overtime. And this was actually crazy because it was actually tied, right, with like 3 seconds left. And there was a shot that actually could have went in, but the refs actually overturned it and say that the shot does not count. And that's why the game went into overtime. Now, I'm not going to lie. I do like USC. I do like Jazzy Davidson. But I think that is a little bit of a controversial call, okay? I don't think that was that great of a call, but like whatever. And then Jazzy did step it up, and that is what allowed USC to win in overtime. Now, here's my problem, okay? USC for this past season has been ran by Jazzy. Let's be completely honest here. Jazzy Davidson has been putting Southern Cal on her back for the entire season. So my question is, if Jazzy, God forbid, if Jazzy gets hurt, what is USC going to do? No other player is really stepping it up the way Jazzy is. Okay? They're running their entire offense through Jazzy, which, don't get me wrong, Jazzy is a great player. She's a phenomenal player. She's the best freshman in the country, no questions asked. But what exactly is USC going to do if, God forbid, they need to rest her for whatever reason it may be? I think that is where USC is going to run into its troubles. Now, for the second round, Southern Cal has to face South Carolina, and I just don't think that it's going to be a pretty game at all. Now, do I think this is going to be a 69-point game for South Carolina? No, right? But can I see South Carolina winning by like 30 or 40 points? Yeah. Because if Southern Cal does not do something where the play calling and the offense is not really ran through Jazzy, then they are going to be in trouble, because Dawn Staley and South Carolina, they're going to spot that Jazzy Davidson is the main scorer for the team, and all they're going to do is just lock her up. They are going to prevent Jazzy from having such a big game or a major impact on the game, which is actually going to hinder Southern Cal in this game. So that is not going to be a pretty game. I'm already calling it. It's not going to be a pretty game at all, but maybe Southern Cal can figure it out beforehand, but I just don't see that being a pretty game, truly. And then the last game that I want to talk about is Iowa State, because they got bounced by Syracuse. Now, Audi Crooks, a lot of people want to talk about her, but she put up 47 points in that game. The problem with Iowa State, a lot of people want to say, is the problem is Audi Crooks and her defense, which I'm not going to lie, Audi Crooks is not the greatest when it comes to defense, okay? I'm not going to sit here and say she's the greatest defensive player in the world, because she is not. But what I think one of the biggest problems is when it comes to Iowa State is just the fact that there are no other players outside of Audi Crooks. Like, let's be honest. Audi Crooks is really like the main focal point for the team. All of the offense basically gets handed down to Audi in the paint for her to go and lay it up. That is Iowa State's scheme. So when you have the 3 points open, when you have even the mid-range open, okay? No one's really taking that because everyone's passing the ball to Audi, okay? Now, again, is Audi a defensive liability? Yes. I'm not sitting here and saying that she's not, because she is, okay? She is not that great at defense. Okay, we can all be honest. But to say that Audi Crooks is the reason why Iowa State is struggling is total BS. The problem is that Iowa State needs more players. Audi needs more help, because ultimately these teams, they are picking and rolling Audi Crooks. All they're doing is just a pick and roll going up to the basket. It's not looking pretty for her. So what they need to do is get more recruits that can help out Audi. Maybe get like a better guard, maybe get some better forwards. Whatever it may be, they need to build that team around Audi, so that way Audi is not feeling that pressure on the court, because she knows as soon as she steps into the court, all eyes are on her. They're not focused on the other players. They're focusing on her because they know that Audi is your main girl. That is the main person that is going to be putting up all of the points for the team. So you need that extra help over there. Okay, so I think as long as Iowa State goes and recruits or gets NIL deals, whatever it may be, then and they can go and they can help out Audi, then I think Iowa State will be straight. I think Iowa State would be good. But until they do that, I can see Iowa State continuing to struggle, not only in the regular season, but then also in the March Madness. So thank you so much for tuning in. Next week, we will be talking about boxing. We will be talking more about the NBA. We'll be talking about the NHL and seeing what the playoffs are looking like, and so much more. So see you next week. Bye.